Chances are when I say LEGO Castle, Knight's Kingdom isn't the first thing that comes to mind. You're probably thinking something more like the classic Yellow Castle, maybe 2007's Fantasy era, or even the most recent Lion Knight's Castle. But today I want to introduce you to the very special and unique castle theme that is Knight's Kingdom from 2004. This often overlooked theme really does have quite a bit to offer. So, hey, let's take a closer look. In a previous video, I covered part of this first wave of Knight's Kingdom sets. Those were the action figures released in January of 2004. If you've not seen that video already, it might provide some interesting background for this one, and I'm not going to double up on too many of the things I talked about there. Later that year, in July and in August, there was a pretty substantial wave of system sets, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. All of the sets here, except the two that were released later in August, directly tie into the main story of Knight's Kingdom. A story which, conveniently enough, is showcased in most all of their marketing materials, including the instruction booklets, in the form of a map. And it's going to conveniently guide us through our journey today. Our story begins at the Castle of Marcia, where King Matthias has had a long and prosperous rule until one day he suddenly vanishes. 4 knights from various provinces join forces to attempt to find the king and save the kingdom. Now, it's not often that I get to start with the biggest set of the wave, which is pretty exciting. The Castle of Marcia has 637 pieces altogether, retailed for $90 back in the day, and includes 7 minifigures, pretty much all the main players in this first wave of sets. If you're looking to pick up a new version of the kit, it's going to cost probably over $300. And a used one goes for about $150. The set also came with, at least in the US, 5 trading cards, which is super cool, and something we'll see throughout most of the system-based sets in this wave. Of the system playsets, this one does have the most, with 5 unique cards, which is pretty sweet. In the story of Knight's Kingdom, Vladek serves as an advisor to the king, but he has evil intentions, and one day actually throws the king into his own dungeon and takes power for himself. That's why the king disappears. And that ties into the main play feature of this castle, which is the fact that it can transform from good to evil. It's a pretty fun feature and a pretty thorough transformation, making use of some fun prints along the way too. Of course, you've already noticed the inclusion of a raised base plate. This one is really special though because it's printed all over the place and has some really great textures and cobblestones. I love it when the base plates were used to their full potential like this. It makes for a really great look. And this build makes good use of all the space provided on the base plate. There's actually an additional base plate included in the set as well. That's an 8x16 base plate out front for the gate, which can be easily removed. No staircase to the main entrance is included in this set. I have no idea why. It wouldn't have taken that much more pieces to do, but it just didn't happen. You can actually remove all the modules of the castle fairly easy. They're just sat on tiles all loose, and you can see pretty much the entire base plate all on its own, pretty bare bones. There's just a few added details on the sides and the front. Another thing worth pointing out right away, and it's something that I mentioned in my first Knight's Kingdom video, is the inclusion of what ultimately becomes an almost Knight's Kingdom exclusive color, and that's blue violet. Blue violet is similar to a lot of other LEGO blues. There is just a lot of LEGO blues in general, but there's something very unique and, for lack of a better word, royal about it. It's a very fitting color for a king, which of course is exactly what it's used for throughout this theme. The king and his castle, and was discontinued after the second wave of Knight's Kingdom. The last sets it would show up in were in 2005, and that was after it was introduced just in 2004. Let's take a moment to look at all these minifigures close up because they are really well done. Perhaps you've already seen the action figure variants of these guys, and I think they've done a good job of maintaining a lot of consistency between the minifigs and action figures. Unlike the action figures, all the swords for these knights are the exact same mold, and I think that's totally okay at this scale, but they do keep the same colors introduced with the action figures, so we're getting a lot of really unique colors within the swords. They feature the familiar armor piece that's been used for decades at this point, it just has a unique print for each knight. Much like the action figures too, the helmets, face prints, armor printing, colors are all unique. And I think the graphic design team did a really good job, especially in capturing the faces of these characters. And each face tells you a lot about the personality of each. It's worth highlighting Danju here because I'm sure the price you see on screen probably caught you a bit off guard. What I think happened here is that people started parting out Danju minifigures for his purple helmet, which can be technically used for some classic LEGO spacemen. And because of that, the figure has shot up in price dramatically over the last few years. Now, of course, just this January, the official LEGO Classic Space Helmet was released in one of the Chinese New Year sets, so I hope all the people who ripped apart the Danju figures feel very bad for what they've done. We also get King Matthias in this set, making use of the classic chromed gold crown piece. He does not have a cape, which is kind of unfortunate, but he does have a unique torso print and a silver sword, the same one as the other knights. You'll notice too that he makes use of that special blue color, the blue-violet, for his arms and hip piece too, which is pretty cool. Vladek is done in a very similar style to the rest of the knights, getting his own unique helmet and shield and armor print, which is great stuff. He looks plenty menacing. Also included in this set is one essential army building figure in the form of a Shadow Knight. We'll be seeing plenty of those throughout the rest of this wave of sets. There are a few side builds, one being a horse for King Matthias, which includes a unique horse barding, which has some nice shiny gold printing on it. And it's also done in that really rare blue-violet color. The other side build is our villain attack machine, which is a very fun scorpion-shaped scorpion launcher. It literally launches scorpions at the castle. There's this interesting moment in one of the commercials that actually suggests that throwing scorpions at the castle turns it evil. It comes with 3 extra scorpions for ammo, but there's also 2 others in the castle. And let's break down the castle module by module, starting with the gate, which again, of course, is on that separate faceplate, doesn't actually connect to the castle in any way. It's really simple, but there actually is a mechanism to hold the gate up so you can pass underneath easily, which is really nice. It's just 2 modified 1x1 bricks with the bar out front. On the one side, it's got the blue-violet colors, and on the other, it's got the dark red for Vladek. The front right module is pretty simple. It's just built upon an 8x8 black brick, which is a big chunk of plastic. On the top, there's a simple crossbow and flag, and underneath, a transgreen spider and some bars. Could serve as a really, really low-roofed dungeon perhaps, but there's not a lot in here. And unfortunately, that's going to be the theme of most of the interior of this castle. The front left module at least has more going on the top. It's got the same crossbow, but in place of the flag, has this really interesting catapult design, which makes use of a reddish-brown chain. By pulling this, you launch the boulder, and there is absolutely nothing underneath, unfortunately. The rear right module at least has something interesting going on in the interior, and obviously it has a little bit more height to work with, which is great. The interior gives us a skeleton, which I guess could be counted as the 8th minifigure of the set, on a rotating door. There's torches on the back, and on the inside is the armory. I don't know why they're holding a skeleton in there too, it's an interesting choice, but there's 2 more silver swords. The other side features the same exact top, but is our proper prison. And even though this is the good guy dungeon, I think it's rather dark that they include a skull. Yeah, that's all for the interior of those. Let's take a look at the interior of the main structure. The foundation for this main structure is an absolutely massive 12 by 24 brick. You don't see a piece like this too often, definitely not anymore. And even though there's all sorts of space to work with, there's not much going on in this interior. Of course, there's that entryway that we talked about that you can't really get to without any stairs. And on the inside, there are 2 axes on the wall and a treasure chest. The treasure chest actually opens in 2 places, interestingly enough. In the top part are your typical 4 gold coins, which is always great to see. And then you can open it to the side also, where there's a hidden compartment underneath with this printed 1x2 tile of some sort of necklace. There's also a frog. See, LEGO designers have always been obsessed with frogs, even back in 2004. The second level is slightly more interesting just by nature of it being a little more closed up. The walls have some more detail, mostly due to the transforming features. In fact, the inside looks pretty evil as it is right now. But I suppose if you swing things out and transform it, you could make this a more blue looking throne room. The throne is completely brick built and sat upon one of those large 4x4 turntables. Doesn't look terribly comfortable if I'm being completely honest. Other than that, there's nothing in the interior, which is a bit of a pity because there was just so much space to work with. Regardless, still lots of place to put figures and play out the story or a story of your own. It's well worth mentioning the really unique architecture of not only this set, but many of the other sets in this wave. There is a very modern flair to these castles, making use of a lot of sloped pieces rather than the predominantly just rectangular shapes. There is very much a sleekness to this castle. It's very stylized, very interesting. And even though I'll always be a sucker for your standard rectangular looking castle, there's something very fun and refreshing about this sort of style. I've covered quite a few raised base plate sets on this channel before, and I always make a point to discuss whether or not a set does so effectively, and this one definitely does. I'd argue that this set makes better use of the raised base plate than even Scorpion Pyramid from Pharaoh's Quest did. It fills it out so nicely, and I think makes for a really striking and memorable composition all on its own. It's an expensive yet beautiful and well-rounded set, and a great place to begin our journey, because it's here that our 4 knights from various provinces meet up and discover the locked up King Matthias. At this point, Vladek's power has grown exponentially, and on their own they cannot kick him out of the castle. They're going to need the help of an ancient artifact called the Heart of the Shield. And from the Castle of Marcia, King Matthias sends them out to find the heart. And on the way, our knights are going to encounter all sorts of challenges. And our first challenge comes in the form of set number 8778, Border Ambush. Border Ambush is one of the smallest sets of the wave, coming in at a total of $20, 177 pieces, and 2 minifigures, Santas and another Shadow Knight. The function is pretty unique. Santas, of course, is our knight known for his incredible strength. Strength such that he could lift up a giant rock, hurl it across a bridge at the enemy down on the other side. The set includes one of the soccer football spring action pieces, which allows you to, in essence, chuck the boulder across the bridge. And thanks to some simple guides here, the boulder hits with surprising accuracy. But that's not the only thing this set has to offer. There's also a trap for our brave knights in the form of a trap door at the end of the journey, should they get distracted by that beautiful silver key, which certainly has caught my eye. I do miss the days of having more chromed parts. That's something they really should bring back. But there's really just some great stuff going on here, like the flexible rope bridge made out of the green stringed elements with studs on either sides. There's the spikes underneath should you fall through the very wide holes. There's plenty of greenery too, which is something I think that the Castle of Marcia could have benefited from, just some green plant life, but they make great use of that here. Oh, and did I mention that the trapdoor leads down to a pit filled with scorpions? I mean, that's just great stuff. Another simple detail I love about this set that so many other sets, even today, forget to add is just the suggestion of a staircase to get up to this side of the bridge. Granted, there's no way down on the other side unless you want to fall into the scorpion pit, but even just having this goes a long way. This here is fantastic stuff. And the good news is, too, if you want to get a used one, it looks like it's about $20 right now, exactly what you would have paid for it in 2004. You can even pick up a new one for around 50 bucks. This has always been one of my favorite sets, and it has aged wonderfully. This set is a complete win for me. But anyway, where to next? Well, our next step on our quest is the Citadel of Orlan, where the Heart of the Shield is rumored to be kept. The Citadel is the second largest set of the wave, coming in at $50 with 442 pieces. We've got 4 minifigures here all together, 2 of which are actually unique. Santis we of course have seen before, but this is actually a really weird version of Raskus. Instead of a printed chest plate, he has just a printed torso with that same chest plate design. And we can theorize why this is in just a bit. The set also includes the Guardian, and yet another Shadow Knight. Now, this was a set I actually only just picked up last year, and I was able to get it in practically new condition, meaning that the trading cards were even still sealed, which is really great. Another great thing about getting the set basically new is having the instruction booklet in immaculate condition. Instead of the action figures you're used to seeing here with the artwork, we actually get a minifigure scaled telling of the story of Knight's Kingdom, starting with the Castle of Marcia, going to the border ambush, then to here, the Citadel of Orlan. This is where the knights need to go to get the treasure, the Heart of the Shield, but it isn't going to be easy for them. There are tests for each of the 4 knights as they make their way to get this legendary artifact. And that of course starts with yet another boulder-based strength test for Santis. This one is a particularly clever mechanism, making good use of our friend gravity. You probably got a hint of this by looking at the trading card, but by splitting the boulder here in half with his sword, the bridge will raise. And it's another surprisingly effective function that works without fail. Inside, the boulders are slightly weighted with the addition of some extra pieces, and that's all it takes to raise this little platform up. These sections too can come apart. They aren't held together by anything, not even Technic pins. And the only other thing of note about this section is that there's another frog in it. Guys, I'm trying to tell you, LEGO has always been obsessed with these little guys, and we have always benefited because of it. That brings us to the largest section of the Citadel, the main tower, on top of which is housed the actual Heart of the Shield. Much like the Castle of Marcia, the interior leaves a bit to be desired here. The second floor upon which you enter after crossing the bridge has a single flame. On the bottom there's a skull, and then of course on the top is the shield. We'll get there in a second. To get up there, you need to climb. And this is another really unique and clever function. And I think it's the reason why Raskus doesn't have a chestplate. In order to climb this wall, Raskus is given this 7-long piece of dark bluish gray flex tube. My theory is that maybe someone at LEGO thought the chest plate would get in the way of this function, and therefore it was omitted. And by turning this gear, it will pick him up, and then you can continue to climb, and you can ultimately deposit him on the top. It's not perfect by any means, but it's a tremendous amount of fun. And I think it's okay for there to be a bit of a challenge in the play function too. It works reliably enough so as not to be frustrating. But at the top is the Heart of the Shield. And the Heart of the Shield as depicted in this set is pretty lackluster. It's just a trans orange disc. But what's nice about this though is that it can easily be placed on a shield and you can still see through it. It gives the shield an effect. It's starting to look a little sci-fi. One of the sets that we'll take a look at in a bit does this a little better. According to the Knight's Kingdom lore, once the knights have ascended this tower, they have one final test awaiting them, and that is the adherence to the knightly code. That they are not going to take this Heart of the Shield and use it for personal gain, but going to use it to help others. And it is Danju who steps in and says to the Guardian, "May we take this to save our kingdom?" And the Guardian permits them to have it. That's all for this middle section. There is one last section remaining with all sorts of wonderful traps for our knights to get through. The interior of this section actually has a pretty fun feature which tests the character of our knights. Do they go for the treasure chest and the goodies that could be inside? Well, if they do, opening it up actually lands an axe right on your head. But on the inside there are 5 beautiful gems. So if you manage to dodge that, Hopefully you learned a valuable lesson in addition to looting the chest. The outside gives us perhaps what is the most ugly snake build LEGO has ever made, but again has a really well incorporated feature in that as you slide it back and forth, its mouth opens. There's also this horrible slide, and as you slide down to escape the Citadel, you have to try not to be axed a lot. The Citadel, more than any of the other sets in the wave, makes use of a lot of the large 4 Juniors pieces that were available at the time. The set certainly doesn't have the same sleekness and elegance possessed by the Castle of Marcia, but all things considered, it makes use of these pieces in the most effective ways possible, giving you a really bulky set for your money. And I think it looks about as good as it can while making use of these rather obnoxious pieces. This set is undeniable fun, there is no shortage of things to do with it, and I really enjoy how all of the tests are catered to the special abilities of each knight. It's a well thought out set, no doubt about it. Now with the Heart of the Shield in hand, our knights must make the return journey to the Castle of Marcia. And unfortunately, that return journey doesn't go as smoothly as our knights would like, as they run into Vladek himself on the path. And that encounter is what set number 8777 is trying to recreate. This is the smallest set of the wave, as you probably guessed, clocking in at a grand total of 42 pieces and retailing for a rather odd $9. Now, because of the Danju fiasco that I mentioned earlier, the resale value of this set has kind of gone all over the place. A used version is going to cost you at least $30, and a new one is something like $70. Compare that to larger sets like Border Ambush, which you can get for cheaper in both categories. It's kind of ridiculous. Even though the set is really small, it does include 3 trading cards, which is really nice. Apparently there's a Jaco card with this set, which doesn't seem quite right, but hey, you gotta love trading cards no matter what. I was able to pick up an instruction manual for this set in particular too, which is always good fun. Its bonus features are pretty much identical to the one in Citadel of Orlan, just at a smaller scale. Perhaps Danju is out hunting for some food by himself to bring back to the campsite when he encounters Vladek on horseback. Thankfully, there's a catapult nearby and he uses it to scare Vladek off back to Marcia. I can tell that the lore masters had a bit of trouble squeezing this one into the larger storyline, but that's okay. On its own, it's a great set. First of all, we get 2 great minifigures in a really small set, and we get Vladek and the unique Vladek horsebarding too to match up with King Matthias's. That's great stuff. Interestingly enough, Vladek doesn't actually have his shield in this set. Instead, he gets a long black lance. There's also an additional 2 pieces to fill in the back of the horse if you remove the barding. Always a great thing to have. They could have easily cheaped out on the catapult, but they actually managed to retain that Knight's Kingdom style within this tiny catapult, making use of the same angles that we see in the Castle of Marcia and Citadel of Orlan. It just simply fires these 1x1 dark bluish gray cylinders at Vladek. And that's all there is to say about this set. There's only one stop left on our official journey, and that is to the Grand Tournament, which Vladek is hosting to make himself officially the ruler of Marcia. You see, Vladek thinks with his evil powers, he can easily win the tournament and gives some sort of validity to his reign over the kingdom. But little does he know that these knights have the one thing that can defeat him, the Heart of the Shield. The Grand Tournament is a mid-size set in the wave with 312 pieces retailing for $30. You can pick it up used for about $30 and brand new for $100. Like the other sets, it includes 3 trading cards as well, which is great. This set is so insane to me because, and we might as well point it out right away, of its play feature, which are these brick-built slammers. There's really no technique holding these things together. It is just clutch power that you slam into to get these things rolling. And I won't demonstrate on the table because it's gonna damage some stuff. Instead, my wife and I set these up on the concrete and had them go at each other. And all you do is you take your fist, pound on the top, and they roll into each other on these beautiful brick-built horses? Wheeled horses? Regardless, it's great fun, but It's not a perfect function by any means. Depending on how hard you hit the slammer may disintegrate. The bricks where the points of contact are will almost certainly be dented, scratched, and as you can see here, some of the black of the inverted tile is actually rubbing off on the white. Great stuff. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a play feature like this would never survive QA today. I suppose I should probably highlight the minifigures. We've seen them all here before, but we've got 3 altogether. That's Jaco, Vladek, and then King Matthias cheering Jaco on from the stands. Before we get to the stands, I'll quickly point out the side builds too. There is an additional weapons rack, which has some weapons, including the swords of Vladek and Jaco. Off to the sides, we actually get these rather interesting flags, which are the same exact shields used for the action figures. Great to see those repurposed in the sets themselves. And then the stand, again, makes use of the familiar style that we've seen throughout the other sets, and then we've got King Matthias sat on the throne there. If you tip his throne back, you'll actually find that there's some goodies under his seat. Again, some more of those chrome coins. You can keep score of the tournament by making use of these turntables here, which have a blue side and a red side, which is pretty fun. It's a simple enough set, not perfect in its execution, but the way it goes about it without the need for specialized pieces is something I'll always respect. But of course, Vladek is overthrown with the power of the Heart of the Shield and of course the power of teamwork, and peace is restored to the land of Marcia. Until Wave 2, but we'll save that one for another day. So that wraps up the main line of story-based sets. There's 2 additional kits we'll get to, but I just want to highlight some of the gear and some of the unreleased items related to Knight's Kingdom for this first wave. Knight's Kingdom was super interesting in that there was a ton of supplementary items. That included things like a chess game with a bunch of unique minifigures, books, an alarm clock, a watch, a Game Boy Advance game, magnets, really all sorts of stuff. Now, unfortunately, I don't have most of those gear items, but one thing that I do have that is rather special is the Adventure Box. So the Adventure Box was a combination of some of these items, basically a book and some poly bags shoved inside this lovely little package. So inside this package is a book that goes through the whole story that we just talked about, the quest for the Heart of the Shield. It's beautifully illustrated in graphic novel style, and it's great stuff. The box also included 2 rather interesting poly bags. One of them I still even have sealed. This thing is dirt cheap to pick up on Bricklink if you're interested. No minifigure included, and it's simply called Catapult, with a whopping 27 total pieces. Thankfully, the Adventure Box also gave us a minifigure too, a poly bag, strangely enough titled Jaco. And while this knight may be light blue, that is where the similarities with Jaco end. Interestingly enough, there are more of these individual character poly bags too. There's one for Vladek. We've seen Vladek quite a bit at this point, and I'm pretty sure, you know, this guy isn't Vladek. That's Johnny Thunder in Shadow Knight armor. In addition to the Vladek and Jaco polybags, there are actually 3 unreleased polybags of the remaining 3 knights, Santis, Danju, and Raskus. If you are a huge Knight's Kingdom fan, it's worth pointing out that you can collect most of the pieces featured in these unreleased polybags. Somehow they have made their way out onto Bricklink, and most can still be purchased, though many are going to set you back a pretty hefty sum, like Santis's red Fabuland axe, Danju's purple halberd, or Raskus's green spear and green helmet. It's also worth pointing out that these polybags wouldn't have featured the knight chestplate, and instead had the printed torsos like we saw in the Jaco polybag, and also Raskus from the Citadel of Orlan. Just a really fascinating piece of history. It's not so often that you see such a high number of unreleased sets that were very clearly at least in production at one point. Another rather odd but noteworthy addition to the Knight's Kingdom portfolio is the Save the Kingdom board game. Mike Rayhawk, lead illustrator for Knight's Kingdom, responsible for most of the artwork you've seen in this video so far, tells a funny story about this particular product. LEGO's choice of licensing partners wasn't always the best. They licensed the Knight's Kingdom game out to Rose Art right as the company was being bought up by our arch nemesis, Mega Bloks. The result was a disaster that ended up on a bunch of Board Game Geek's worst game of all time lists. having acquired and played the game for myself, I can tell why it wasn't a hit. Instead, it's the game pieces that make this important to the collection, including all 4 knights and Vladek, as well as 25 trading cards, some of which are extremely rare. And because of that, the game still fetches a hefty $50 on the aftermarket. Be careful though, as there are 2 versions of the game, one with 25 cards and one with 3. That leaves us with just 2 more sets for the first wave of system playsets. These 2 actually would have been sold together in some cases, or you could purchase them separately as well, and that is Knight's Castle Wall and Vladek's Siege Engine. Both would have retailed for $19.99. We'll start by taking a look at Knight's Castle Wall. I don't know where these last 2 sets fit in canonically, but they're very interesting to take a look at nonetheless. Knight's Castle Wall is actually not a part of the Castle of Marcia, but rather a castle from Jaco's home province of Talonjade, as shown by the light blue flags and Jaco's shield on the wall. Knight's Castle Wall is exactly what it proclaims to be. It is a $20 wall. And as a castle lover myself, I still love this set, but there really is nothing going on here. It does have 3 minifigures, which is great. Everybody except Danju for some reason. There is actually nothing in the interior, and there's only one simple play feature, and that you can dump rocks on your enemies if they come into this very singular, particular location. One thing this set really does have going for it, though, is a new try at the heart of the shield. This time it's made in a beautiful, shiny, chromed gold. It's a much more impressive look than the transparent orange. This set does technically have an additional function if you have the next set too, in that you can bash down the doors, because the second set is Vladek's Siege Engine. Perhaps you noticed it, maybe you didn't, but there are really not a lot of bad guy things in this entire wave. We have the Scorpion Catapult, and we have Vladek's Horse, and a bunch of Shadow Knights. Oh, and Vladek's Wheeled Horse. I guess you can make the entirety of Castle of Marcia evil, which there's a good argument to be had there, but Vladek hardly gets anything that's his own until we get this, which is really quite fantastic. Just like Knight's Castle Wall, this would have retailed for $20 on its own, and it's got 192 pieces altogether. This has a great look to it, again making great use of the shield cardstock included with the action figures, one on both sides, to very nicely fill in what otherwise would have been a really ugly gap. The set includes Vladek and a Shadow Knight, of course, and the main feature is the battering ram. And the battering ram is quite beautiful because it has, again, another chrome gold piece. This is the dragon head, which was included in the Orient Expedition line, the flagship set of that theme. Really cool to see it brought back here for this small, seemingly insignificant set. It's hung super loosely on the siege wagon itself, so you can actually get some pretty good ramming function with it by pulling it back. It wobbles around pretty satisfyingly. It looks really good. It's great to get some Vladek stuff. But of course, if you're familiar with Knight's Kingdom 2, you know Vladek gets his fair share of goodies in the next wave. And that's the first wave of Knight's Kingdom for you. Even amongst the many castle themes that have been done over the years, this one stands out with its very unique style and the very thorough development of its characters and story. Yes, this is a story we would go on to see time and time again. Knight's Kingdom gives you everything you'd want from a castle theme, but also embraces the new image that LEGO was going for as they came out of a rather dark period of their existence. Juniorization is a word that gets thrown around a lot, and to some extent you can definitely accuse Knight's Kingdom of being guilty of that, especially this first wave. However, as this was my first LEGO theme, and I was quite young when I started building these, I probably appreciated that, so there was value in the juniorization of things. It opened up these larger themes to younger people. There was undoubtedly a ton of love poured into this theme, and it must have done reasonably well to continue on for as long as it did. I love how play feature focused these sets were. They were a ton of fun. They still are a ton of fun. And the things you see here are pretty unique when compared to LEGO sets today. Don't get me wrong, some of the functions were pretty bold, like the slammers from the Grand Tournament, but at the end of the day, it's good fun, and that's what LEGO is supposed to be all about, and I love how this embodies that. Yeah, I've heard some hate thrown around at this theme, but I love it, and I hope I've convinced at least a few of you of its merits too, because there's really something special about this. It doesn't feel generic fantasy at all. It takes on a life of its own, and that's really cool. What do you make of the first wave of Knights Kingdom sets? Would you like to see videos on the future waves? Do let me know. But anyway, that's all I've got for this time. You have yourself a fantastic life, and I'll see you later.